Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy. It was called Crossroads. And as it begins, we see that the diviner is recovering slowly, and he seems not to remember anything, genuinely, which I wasn't sure about before. I wasn't sure if his memory loss was genuine or if he was faking it. It was interesting to see him in this state because without his memory, he's not evil. He's like normal and vulnerable and sympathetic. And, this side of him is probably closer to who he really is outside of his predilection towards doing evil things, which he's only doing out of pain and fear. So I thought it was interesting to see the other side of him. He does seem, though, to remember Gwen's name in this opening scene, which was interesting. While this is going on, the crew is stashing the protostar under a bunch of snow on an icy planet so that they can go to Starfleet some other way to explain to them what's been going on without putting them in danger. Murph is still going through changes, but the crew is taking him with them. They put hologram Janeway into sleep mode after saying goodbye, and then they take off across the frozen tundra. Why they didn't beam to the nearby spaceport, I don't know, but they didn't. They decided to walk. When they get there, they soon encounter OKANA, who, of course, was in an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. But before they can make a deal with him for transport, he gets accosted by the XINDI, who I guess run security there and who run the port there, because apparently he's been smuggling. We then see that our friend from the space station is there telling his tale of woe to a Kazon as the real Janeway arrives to interrogate him. Pog runs into the Tellarite crew member from the Dauntless, Janeway's ship, and they have a terse exchange, so he forgets to tell him what he needs to tell him. Gwen almost gets her heirloom thing taken by a Klingon who she approaches for a ride, but he's prevented from taking it by a member of Janeway's crew, who then realizes who Gwen is and tells her that her father is on her ship, causing her to run. Dal, meanwhile, runs into actual Janeway, but before he can tell her anything, he has to run off because the guy from the space station is brought before her by one of her crew, and he doesn't want to be recognized. Of course, this guy, this creepy guy from the space station, describes the crew to Janeway, and she realizes that they're there because she was just talking to one of them. The crew regroups and takes off in some kind of speeder before Janeway can get XINDI security to close the doors of the building they were in, because they're afraid that if Starfleet finds the protostar because of them, they will end up being the cause of Starfleet destroying themselves. They are, of course, pursued across this icy landscape, and as they start trying to defend themselves, they discover OKANA hiding in a compartment on the speeder. They manage to escape their pursuers by means of the use of an illegal fuel that OKANA happened to have, which sped them away super fast back to the protostar. Then Janeway watches as the protostar launches and takes off, but is soon pursued by the Dauntless, which for some reason is able to chase them at warp. And I guess it's because they're using a quantum slipstream situation, but I don't know. I hadn't thought that was possible. I've addressed this before. Anyway, as they're trying to escape in the protostar, Murph's new form emerges as a bipedal individual, which sits on a console and accidentally launches a torpedo at the Dauntless, causing the Dauntless to fire back and damage their third nacelle. Upon OKANA suggesting that the protostar enter the Romulan neutral zone to get away from Janeway, they in fact do so, but under modulated shields so that they can't be detected. Janeway orders the Dauntless into the neutral zone, but her Andorian first officer says he can't execute her order because it would violate treaty. And a moment later, 3 Romulan warbirds decloak and remind the Admiral that the Dauntless can't enter the neutral zone without starting a war. And that's where the episode ended. So I always enjoyed this show. I enjoyed this episode, but mostly because of the cool ice planet landscape and the cool ice uniform items that the crew were wearing, the Parkers and so forth. I thought it all looked really good. And, I also like it because, again, the characters demonstrate a lot of heart and a lot of care for other people. And I think that's cool. But there wasn't much of a plot to this episode. It just featured the crew kind of separating to, smaller groups or into individual teams of one that went around trying to book transport. And they end up coming across Janeway's crew, and then Janeway chases them to the protostar. So it was just very uncomplicated, which, you know, you don't want a plot that's overly complicated, but this was just very simplistic. And I don't know, that I think they could do better than that. But I guess it did kind of bring things to a head where, you know, now the crew knows that the diviner survived and is on the Dauntless. And, you know, Janeway's crew knows who they're looking for now, and they know where the protostar went, the last location. So it kind of brought things to a head in that way, which I guess makes things interesting. My concern is that this might end up being a one season show, because unless they're going to be chasing the protostar season after season as the crew plays keep away with it so that it doesn't destroy Starfleet. Because the only other option is they'll resolve that whole thing, and then what? They're just going to leave the crew of kids in charge of the protostar? Or are they going to join a crew as passengers, or on a like, is someone else going to take over the protostar and the kids will just be the passengers? Where is it going to go in a season 2? So that's my concern, but I guess we'll see. I'm going to get out of here for now. I, of course, will be back to review the next episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.